Chapter 2 is titled Job Order Costing, Calculating Unit Product Costs. Chapter 2 is the first of our two chapters, along with Chapter 3, that covers job order costing systems. Job order costing systems are fairly common in practice, and as you read about in Chapter 2, given the types of organizations that would use them, you may have seen why they're probably so prevalent. So job order costing systems are typically used when the firm provides a whole bunch of different products or services each period to customers, and where the products that are provided or the services that are provided are specialized or custom to customer specifications. They're not mass produced, in other words. We're not cranking out a whole bunch of different units of one particular product that are indistinguishable from the next. Contrarily, we're providing some kind of product or service that's unique. And given the unique nature of each order, it's going to require tracing or allocating, which is also just a different way of saying assigning cost to each job and maintaining cost records for each job accordingly. So some examples of companies that would use job order costing systems would be like Boeing. So they make large-scale aircraft. They take orders from Delta Airlines, America Airlines, and so on. And those firms, you can think of them, right? They're submitting this order to Boeing for, let's say, 10 custom 747 aircraft. Now, those things look fairly similar from one to the next across different airlines, but there are some differences. How they're branded, right? Some of the ways they're organized in terms of the cabin and the areas where the flight attendant sits and everything like that. So Boeing would typically use a job order costing system to track and trace all the costs assigned to one particular order from Delta versus one particular order from American Airlines, and so on and so forth. Very similarly, a company like Bechtel International, which does very large-scale construction, would also naturally fit this sort of job order costing system model, right? They're working on a particular job site, and everything they're doing on that job site is built to customer specifications. So it just makes sense for them to track costs based on each particular job as it's being worked on. And then even creative work, something like Walt Disney Studios or any film or television production. Those things, again, are very specialized. We're talking about in terms of the talent that's employed to make them, different materials, the sets, all these types of things, very different from one movie or one production to the next. So those very naturally fit a job order costing system as well. Again, job order costing, we want to get in this habit of thinking it's something that's produced on a one-off basis, or at least has some level of customization or specialization to it from one order to the next. So if we think about the flow of costs in a job order costing system, the direct costs, so the direct materials and direct labor, are going to be charged or assigned directly to each individual job as it's being worked on. Remember, if we think back to Chapter 1 and our definition of direct materials and direct labor, those are things that we can very easily associate with one particular thing being produced. In this case, that thing is the job. So we're going to charge those costs directly to the job as it's being worked on. Then we need to figure out a way to assign or allocate all the indirect costs. And that's our third manufacturing cost category from Chapter 1, that big manufacturing overhead bucket. So that includes all those indirect materials, indirect labor, utilities, property taxes, maintenance, whatever. So we're going to need to assign those costs to jobs as they're being worked on. And in a job order costing system, that's typically done using a predetermined overhead rate. In a job order costing system, we'll have some kind of job cost sheet. And we aren't necessarily talking about something on physical paper. Naturally, everything will be automated or electronic. But that job cost sheet or record should summarize all the costs that have been assigned to that particular job. So it should have some information about what the job is, maybe what items are produced, the date it started, the date it's completed when we get that far, how many units are included, and so on. And then it should again keep that running total of all the direct materials and direct labor that have been assigned to that job, as well as all the manufacturing overhead that's been allocated throughout different periods as this thing's been worked on. At the bottom, it should provide some kind of cost summary that shows the total amount of materials, labor, and overhead associated with that job, as well as determines some kind of unit product cost. Now, direct materials costs are going to be first accumulated on some kind of requisition form. And again, this will probably be electronic out there in practice. But as we use raw materials within our production process, we should be recording their use via some kind of requisition process here. So that record should indicate what the job is that these materials are being used for, maybe the department this stuff's coming from, some kind of description of the materials, and then how much of it's being used and what that stuff costs, right? And this is the cost to the company we're talking about here, right? Their cost of acquisition of materials. So that's what should flow through to that job cost sheet we spoke of a minute ago. Just on an ongoing basis, as materials are requisitioned, called upon, in other words, for any particular job, we should have this running total of the materials used for that job on this job cost sheet. Labor costs are going to come from employee time tickets. So we should know with some certainty which employees are considered direct labor, right? The assemblers, the fabricators, and so on, if we're thinking about a manufacturing setting. We should know the time they spent working on each job and what their hourly bill rate is. And these things should include some kind of amount for employee benefits and fringe and things like that. So this should be the total cost of labor. And again, that's going to be summarized on that job cost sheet on a period by period basis to keep a running total of all the labor costs assigned to that job. So that wraps up the job order costing fundamentals or basics, if you will. Please do review the other videos as you see fit.